You probably think you are just becoming lazy, but psychology calls this procrastination through paralysis. Your nervous system is simply refusing one more demand. You sit staring at a screen, reading the same sentence 4 times, your mind screaming to start, yet you just open another tab. If you keep forcing a silently exhausted brain to perform, you will soon lose your capacity to feel any joy. Today I will decode this hidden burnout and show you the way out. But first, what state or city in America are you resting in tonight? Because no matter how lonely this rushing country feels, you have a warm place to breathe right here. Burnout rarely begins with a dramatic collapse. More often, it enters your life quietly. It hides inside habits that look ordinary, flaws you blame on your personality, and struggles you believe you should be strong enough to overcome. You may still get out of bed. You may continue going to work, paying the bills, answering important calls, and telling people that you are doing fine. From the outside, your life may appear completely functional, but inside, something has begun to shut down. You feel tired, but sleep does not restore you. You know what needs to be done, but you cannot make yourself begin. You want connection, yet every conversation feels like another responsibility. Slowly, you start wondering whether you have become lazy, antisocial, impatient, or incapable. But burnout can make an exhausted person look like an unmotivated one. It can make someone who has cared for everyone else appear emotionally distant. It can turn a patient person into someone who becomes angry over a small sound, a simple question, or one more demand placed on an already overloaded mind. And because these changes happen gradually, many people do not recognize what is happening. They do not say, "I am burning out." They say, "I need to try harder." They criticize themselves, increase the pressure, and force their tired nervous system to keep performing. That is why recognizing these 7 signs matters. Not because every difficult day means you are burnt out, but because your behavior may be carrying a message that your conscious mind has been too busy to hear. The first sign is that you procrastinate through paralysis. You sit in front of your computer with the document open. You read the same sentence 3 or 4 times, but the words refuse to stay in your mind. You know the email needs a reply. You understand the consequences of missing the deadline. You may even be frightened by how much work is accumulating. Yet you cannot begin. Instead, you stare at the screen. You rearrange something on your desk. You check your phone without actually enjoying anything you see. You open another tab, walk to the kitchen, return to your chair, and promise yourself that you will start in 5 minutes. Then, an hour disappears. From the outside, this looks like procrastination. Inside, it can feel more like being trapped behind an invisible wall. Your mind is shouting instructions, but your body is refusing to move. This is where many people become cruel to themselves. They say, "What is wrong with me? I used to be disciplined. I used to handle more than this. Why can't I complete one simple task?" But this kind of paralysis is not always a time management problem. Sometimes it is the brain's refusal to accept one more demand. When responsibility has been associated with relentless pressure for too long, even a small task can begin to feel threatening. The task itself may not be difficult, but your nervous system remembers everything attached to it. Expectations, criticism, the fear of failure, the fear of disappointing someone, the pressure to succeed even when you have nothing left. So the brain does what overwhelmed systems often do. It withdraws. It delays action because beginning the task feels like opening the door to another wave of stress. Avoidance offers a few moments of relief, but that relief quickly turns into guilt. The guilt creates more pressure. The pressure creates more paralysis. And soon you are caught in a cycle where the inability to work becomes another reason to hate yourself. You are not necessarily avoiding the task because you do not care. You may be avoiding it because you have cared too much, for too long, without enough rest, safety, or support. The second sign is that you begin building an island around yourself. Messages remain unanswered even though you have seen them. Invitations create dread instead of excitement. The thought of sitting in a restaurant, making conversation, smiling at the right moments, and explaining how you have been feels strangely exhausting. You may care deeply about the people contacting you. You may miss them. You may even feel lonely. But when your phone lights up, your first emotional response is not comfort. It is pressure. You think, "I will answer when I have more energy." But more energy never seems to arrive. Days pass. Then weeks. The longer you remain silent, the more difficult it feels to respond, because now you believe you owe everyone an explanation. You begin avoiding the people you love, not because they have done something wrong, but because you do not know how to show up as the person they expect you to be. Human connection requires emotional energy. We listen, react, reassure, remember details, manage our expressions, and make space for another person's feelings. When you have emotional energy available, these exchanges can be nourishing. But when your internal battery is nearly empty, even kindness can feel like labor. Isolation then becomes a form of protection. Your nervous system begins guarding the little energy you have left. Silence feels safer than conversation. Staying home feels easier than pretending to be okay. You retreat because being alone is the only place where nobody is asking you to perform, explain, comfort, decide, or respond. For a while, that retreat may feel peaceful. But there is a painful difference between solitude that restores you and isolation that slowly erases you. Restorative solitude helps you return to life feeling more grounded. Burnout isolation often leaves you feeling heavier, more disconnected, and more convinced that you have become a burden. You may tell yourself that nobody would understand. You may believe your absence does not matter. You may even assume people are better off without your tiredness, your silence, or your complicated feelings. Those thoughts can become dangerous because exhaustion has a way of changing how you interpret your own worth. It can make temporary withdrawal feel like proof that you do not belong. It can persuade you that your inability to socialize means you are broken, when the deeper truth may be that you have spent too long giving emotional energy without receiving enough care in return. Sometimes the person disappearing from everyone's life is not asking to be forgotten. They are quietly hoping someone will notice that they are no longer able to carry everything alone. The third sign is that you become a slow-burning emotional bomb. You may not think of yourself as an angry person. In fact, you may have spent years being the calm one, the dependable one, the person who absorbs tension, solves problems, and keeps the peace when everyone else is falling apart. But lately, the smallest things seem to break through your self-control. A spoon drops on the floor, and the sound feels unbearable. Someone asks an innocent question, and irritation rises before you can stop it. A slow driver, a barking dog, a child repeating your name, or a coworker sending one unnecessary message can make your entire body tighten. You may snap, speak more sharply than you intended, or feel a surge of anger that seems completely out of proportion to what happened. Then comes the shame. You wonder why you are becoming so impatient. You replay the moment and tell yourself that the other person did not deserve your reaction. You promise to control yourself next time, but the pressure continues building beneath the surface. The small event was not the real cause. It was simply the final drop landing in a nervous system that had no room left. Under chronic stress, your emotional margin becomes narrower. The space between irritation and reaction begins to disappear. You are not suddenly losing your character. You are losing the internal resources that once helped you pause, interpret, and respond with patience. Imagine carrying a glass filled to the very top. When the glass is half empty, a small movement causes no problem. But when it is already overflowing, even the slightest touch spills water everywhere. Burnout can make your body feel like that full glass. Every unfinished obligation, every suppressed emotion, every night without enough sleep, and every moment you force yourself to remain composed adds another drop. Eventually, anger becomes the only emotion strong enough to escape. This does not excuse hurting other people, but understanding the source of your irritability can help you respond with responsibility instead of self-hatred. You may need to apologize for your behavior, but you also need to ask why your system has been pushed so far that ordinary life now feels like an attack. Sometimes irritability is not evidence that you have stopped caring. It is evidence that you have been caring without interruption. The fourth sign is that your body is exhausted during the day, but your mind betrays you at night. You spend the afternoon imagining how good it will feel to finally lie down. Your muscles feel heavy, your eyes burn, you struggle to stay focused, and may believe that the moment your head touches the pillow, sleep will take over. But when the room becomes quiet, your mind wakes up. You remember an awkward conversation from 3 years ago. You mentally rehearse tomorrow's responsibilities. You calculate bills, predict disasters, revisit mistakes, and build arguments for conversations that may never happen. Your body is begging for rest, while your brain continues running as if danger is approaching. This is one of the cruelest contradictions of burnout. You are too tired to function, yet too activated to recover. During the day, work and responsibility may force you to suppress what you feel. There is always another task, another person, or another problem demanding your attention. Night becomes the first moment your mind has enough silence to process everything you postponed. Unfortunately, the nervous system does not always understand that the day is over. When stress has remained high for too long, the body can become accustomed to alertness. You may lie safely in bed, but internally, you are still preparing for the next emergency. Your heartbeat feels louder, your thoughts move faster, Every unfinished responsibility appears urgent. You may reach for your phone because scrolling seems easier than lying alone with your thoughts. You tell yourself that you are relaxing, but the constant stimulation keeps your mind awake. Eventually, you fall asleep from exhaustion rather than peacefulness, only to wake feeling as though the night never happened. Insomnia then deepens the burnout that helped create it. Without restorative sleep, emotional regulation becomes harder. Concentration weakens. Irritability increases. Simple decisions require more effort. The following day feels even more overwhelming, creating more stress for the next night. This is not a personal failure to sleep correctly. It may be a nervous system that no longer remembers how to feel safe enough to shut down. The fifth sign is that everything you once loved begins turning gray. The guitar remains untouched in the corner. The books you used to disappear into now feel difficult to open. Exercise feels pointless. Cooking becomes another chore. The television show you once waited all week to watch plays in the background while you stare through it. You may not feel dramatically sad. That is what makes this sign so easy to miss. Instead, you feel very little. There is no excitement, no curiosity, and no real anticipation. Activities that once made you feel like yourself now seem distant, as though they belong to another version of you. You may tell yourself that you have simply outgrown them. You may blame age, maturity, or lack of discipline. But sometimes the loss of interest is not a change in personality. It is emotional blunting. When the nervous system has been overloaded for too long, it may begin reducing emotional intensity as a way to conserve energy. Unfortunately, it cannot always numb pain without also numbing pleasure. The same protective shutdown that stops you from feeling overwhelmed can also make joy harder to reach. This can create a quiet identity crisis. Without the activities, relationships, and small rituals that once brought meaning to your life, you begin to feel like a machine built only for responsibility. You wake up, perform your duties, survive the day, and repeat. The world may continue praising your productivity while the person inside that productive body slowly disappears. And perhaps the most painful part is that you remember what happiness used to feel like. You can describe it. You can recognize it in other people. You simply cannot reach it yourself. But numbness is not proof that your capacity for joy is gone forever. Sometimes it means your mind has placed everything, including pleasure, into temporary survival mode. Beneath the grayness, the parts of you that loved music, laughter, movement, creativity, and connection may still be there. They are not dead. They may simply be waiting for a life in which they are allowed to breathe again. The sixth sign is that your performance begins slipping in ways you cannot explain. You arrive late even though you left home on time. You forget appointments that would normally stay fixed in your mind. You send an email without the attachment, lose track of simple instructions, or make mistakes in tasks you have completed hundreds of times before. At first, you dismiss these moments as carelessness. Then they happen again. You begin checking your work repeatedly because you no longer trust your own attention. A task that once took 30 minutes now consumes half the day. You move from one unfinished responsibility to another, feeling constantly busy but completing very little. Eventually, you start questioning your competence. You wonder whether you are becoming lazy, irresponsible, or incapable. You compare yourself to the version of you who could handle pressure without missing a detail, and the comparison becomes another weapon you use against yourself. But burnout can interfere with concentration, working memory, decision-making, and mental flexibility. When your brain is using enormous amounts of energy to manage stress, it has fewer resources available for organization and precise thinking. You have not necessarily become less intelligent. Your internal operating system may simply be overloaded. Imagine asking a computer to run dozens of demanding programs at the same time. Eventually, even simple commands begin to lag. The system freezes, files disappear, and errors appear where there were none before. We do not accuse the computer of lacking discipline. We recognize that it has exceeded its capacity. Yet when this happens to a human mind, we often respond with punishment. We work later. We skip breaks. We drink more caffeine. We hide our mistakes and promise to compensate by trying twice as hard tomorrow. But effort cannot always repair exhaustion. Sometimes more effort is the very thing deepening it. The seventh sign is that you begin searching for relief in things that quietly make the problem worse. You crave sugar when you are not physically hungry. One drink becomes the fastest way to silence your mind after work. You smoke more, shop impulsively, binge watch late into the night, or scroll through social media until your eyes hurt. You may tell yourself that you deserve a little comfort. And you do deserve comfort. But there is a difference between comfort that restores you and relief that only helps you escape yourself for a few minutes. When life feels emotionally unbearable, the brain naturally searches for something fast, something that changes the feeling immediately. Food, alcohol, nicotine, shopping, gambling, endless content, or any other compulsive behavior can briefly create stimulation, numbness, or reward. For a moment, the pressure becomes quieter. Then the effect fades. The original exhaustion remains, now joined by guilt, poor sleep, financial stress, physical discomfort, or the fear that you are losing control. So you reach for the same relief again, not because you are weak, but because you have not found another way to regulate what you are carrying. This is sometimes called self-medication. It is an attempt to soothe pain without fully understanding the wound. But temporary relief can become another source of suffering when it replaces genuine recovery. Burnout does not mean you have failed at life. It often means that you adapted to an unhealthy situation so successfully that nobody noticed what it was costing you. You kept showing up, you remained useful, you answered the phone, met expectations, carried other people's emotions, and postponed your own needs because there was always something more urgent. Perhaps you believed rest had to be earned. Perhaps you learned that asking for help made you a burden. Perhaps your value became so closely tied to productivity that slowing down felt like disappearing. But you are more than what you can produce while exhausted. Recovery does not always begin with a dramatic resignation, a long vacation, or a complete reinvention of your life. Sometimes it begins with one honest sentence. I cannot continue living at this pace. It may mean speaking with a doctor or mental health professional, especially when exhaustion, numbness, sleep problems, hopelessness, or isolation persist. It may mean setting a boundary that disappoints someone. It may mean asking for practical help before you feel completely deserving of it. You may need to reduce demands, rebuild sleep, reconnect with safe people, and slowly return to activities that once made you feel alive. Do not expect joy to return instantly. A nervous system that has lived in survival mode may need time to trust rest. At first, slowing down may feel uncomfortable. Silence may bring up feelings that busyness helped you avoid. But discomfort does not mean healing is failing. You are not lazy for needing recovery. You are not selfish for protecting your energy. And you are not broken because your body finally refused to carry what your mind kept demanding. Burnout is not a verdict on who you are. It is information. It is your system telling you that the current way of living has become too expensive. Listen before the whisper becomes a collapse. And if you recognized yourself in any of these 7 signs, consider sharing your experience in the comments. Your story may help someone else realize that they are not failing alone. Subscribe for more conversations about the hidden emotional struggles people carry in silence. And remember this, you do not have to destroy yourself to prove that you are strong.